to Delatory Stories, where we interview local legends, business owners, and other interesting people. Today we have with us a local legend, Garry Clark.
Well, that's a big stretch, local legend. That's a big stretch.
No, I don't. I think that's you're probably the biggest local legend we've had on so far, anyway.
Well then, that's sad.
Before we really get into it here, I usually have Hunter Crouch co-hosting with me. You know Hunter.
Yeah, I know Hunter.
So I was talking to him about some questions to ask, and he said, here's what his question he wanted me to ask. So I'm just going to lead with that for Hunter. He said, ask him, do you remember when Hunter Crouch threw down that dunk in traffic against CCHS on senior night in 2016?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember that well. Even though we won't give him much credit for it, it was the pass to him that made it.
So it really, he just finished it off.
That's right. He just took it after the pass. It was.
He didn't create it.
Yeah. We'll say that to him anyway. Just make him upset.
Yeah, he'll like that. He'll be glad you remembered it anyway.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get into it here a little bit. Just go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background in radio.
Well, I'm Garry Clark, of course. I'm with WDEB Radio. I've been there for 30-something years. I'm not sure how long it is. I've been doing sports for them, and I actually started at WCLC when they were a country station doing sports. And let's see, I've done every type of sport you can imagine. Plus, I used to have a syndicated radio program that I did across the eastern part of the state with the Roan State Recap. I used to do that. I've done that for a few years, had my own radio network. And let's see, I also did PA work for a semi-pro football team out of Cookeville. And a couple years ago, I did tech games for WCTE. So I've been in sports for a long time. And, of course, I am the sports and news director. I do a lot of news as well. So I do a little bit of everything.
You've announced for about every team around here then, I guess, haven't you, at some point?
Exactly. And I was trying to think of somebody asked me how many games I thought I'd done. I said, there's no telling, because I usually average 35, 40 basketball games a year, and then you've got football, you got baseball, softball, and actually this year I even did a wrestling match out at York, which I had never done before. I had no clue what I was doing. But I'm like, Howard Cosell said it in his book, I never played the game. Just do what you can and see what you can do. So that's what I did.
Did you do any listening to any of them other wrestling announcers to prepare for that one?
Well, of course, in high school wrestling, it's completely different. See, I told the folks when they asked me about it, I said, the only wrestling I've ever seen is they jump off the rope and hit each other with chairs. But high school and Olympic style wrestling is a completely different animal. Luckily, they gave me a kid that knew what he was talking about, that actually wrestled, because I looked at him and said, it's all you. I'm just going to fill in when I can. I said, I'll ask questions and you explain everything.
He helped you out on the technical side of it?
Exactly, because I had no idea what anything was called or how they scored or anything.
Yeah, there's a lot of different terms and stuff involved in that, ain't there?
Oh, yeah, you've got to know. One hand is, if they raise the green hand, it's a score for one team. If they raise the red hand, it's a score for the other team. So you have to just constantly watch the official as well. And it's completely different than anything I'd ever done before.
What was the first sporting event that you announced?
It would be basketball. I did basketball for WCLC years and years ago.
Do you remember your first game?
Oh, I was trying to think. I remember Lee Linder was the girls' coach and Larry Bruce Beatty was the boys' coach. But that's been a lot of years ago. I think this is probably my 38th year doing them. And I took actually a little break in between. For a few years, I didn't do them when I first moved to WDEB. I just handled news. And the guy that done them, Garry Crockett, the late Garry Crockett, He had done them for years. And his daughter began to play, and he said, hey, Garry, he said, if you'll do Clark Range basketball, well, I do York, so I can go to my daughter's games. He said, as quick as she graduates, he said, I'll take it back over. And I said, okay. Well, evidently she never graduated because I got stuck with everything after that.
So you've been doing the Clark Range games then for How many years just for Clark Range in York?
Well, for Clark Range, probably, a few more for Clark Range in York, but I started doing both the same. We did Clark Range and York the first year I started doing them back. Gosh, that had to be in 85.
85.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a day or two ago.
Yeah.
It's a lot longer than I've been alive.
That's a lot longer than most people's been alive, I think.
So whenever you were first getting into radio, what made you want to get into radio?
Well, I actually was in school at Middle Tennessee State University. I have a degree in communications, and I went into communications. They told us to go and get as much experience as you can. So I came to one of the local radio stations, WCLC, and I asked if they had any openings, and they put me on weekends. And I used to work early Sunday morning, folks. If you remember back years and years ago, early Sunday morning, that was me.
So whenever you were in high school, is that what you knew you wanted to go to MTSU for communications, or?
Well, yeah, actually, I always wanted to be a sportscaster. I mean, that was the thing. When I was in high school, basketball and baseball and stuff, when I wasn't in the game, that people would say, "Hey, you call it while we're standing here." So I've been doing a little bit of some of that stuff ever since I was little.
Do you do a lot of practicing for the sports announcing? I mean, of course, you've done it so long now, you probably don't. But back when you first started, did you do a lot of that just at home?
Yeah, you would sit around, you would think of things to say, and just phrases you want to use and terms you want to use, and I learned from Chris Berman off of ESPN. The easiest way to remember a kid's name is give them a nickname. That's where the nicknames come from, folks. You can thank Chris Berman on ESPN because it helps you remember kids' names.
Yeah, it sticks with them a little better,
Exactly.
I guess, don't it?
It distinguishes them from the other kids, and and it's easier just to remember their name.
Yeah, especially, I guess, if it's two kids who have the same last name.
Exactly.
You have to do something then, don't you?
Yeah, and if they're twins, they're a nightmare. We've had several sets of twins that have really been a nightmare.
Yeah, we had the Monday twins on the podcast, and I'd say they were definitely fun to.
Yeah, they were hard to keep apart. I couldn't tell them apart. Thanks goodness for numbers is all I got to say. Without numbers, I'd been lost.
Whenever you're preparing to go into a game, what do you do before the game starts, like when you're getting ready for the game?
Well, the most is setting up the equipment. You have to set up all the equipment, and that's changed a lot over the years too. And of course, you go in, you get all the like in basketball, you get all the lineups and all that. Football, they usually give you that. Football's a little bit easier because they actually have a stats team that does the games for you, and you don't have to keep your own stats. But with basketball, you have to get all the stats. Baseball, you have to keep all your own stats and run the equipment and do everything at the same time.
You were talking about how the equipment has changed over the years. That's one thing I was going to ask you. What do you think about how much it's changed since you first started?
Oh, it's like night and day. I mean, when I first started, you would go to an away location to do a game. You had to call the telephone company, have a phone line put in. You had to do it over a phone line. The equipment you plugged in, you actually dialed up just like you would a phone, and then you would do the games. Then it went to cell phones, which made it much easier to set up. And now everything we have runs through the internet. So it all runs through a hotspot and computer. So I get to sit and run the computer and the radio station from wherever I'm at. I'm running the entire show from wherever location I'm at, which is completely different. And it all relies on, internet service and what kind of internet service you have in places like. There's some places you can't get internet service.
I was going to say some gyms, especially I'd say some of them older gyms.
Oh, yeah.
They probably have a nightmare service in there.
Exactly. In places like Red Bull and Springs, you have trouble. And then you have the new schools where they put in the things to keep kids from using their phones, which really messes up. Like Monterey's one of the worst.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. They put in that stuff to block them, don't they? So what do you do in those situations? I mean, you just kind of...
Well, you have to get creative. You find a spot where you can get at least a little bit of signal, and just hope it's
and hope it's hit.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with the hotspot is you've got to kind of get it in a location where you can get some signal at all. But with ours, we use a camera, and we also live stream, and we do radio and everything all at the same time. So we have to have a lot of bandwidth. So we've figured out which schools we can't go to.
Yeah. Talking about which schools you can't go to there, how hard is it to decide when schools are playing on the same night which one to go to?
That's the big question. Usually, what I try to do is go with the one that means the most. If one of them's playing a district game, one of them's playing a non-district game, I'll go with the district game because it means more. And then on the other side, it's trying to get balanced, because when you have two high schools in the same county and you have to give one of them as equal to as the other, it gets really tricky on getting them scheduled out to where they each get the certain same amount.
Yeah, you can't always make everybody happy, can you?
Exactly. Well, like, for example, this year in baseball, we did a ton of York baseball games, but we only done a few Clark Range baseball games because the weather. Every time we did one, got one scheduled for Clark Range, it rained it out. And then they would move it to the other school, and then we couldn't do it. We don't do road games with baseball and softball, so we had to do whatever games we could get in.
Yeah, I feel like that's been a big problem during the baseball season this year. We've got a lot of rain, and it seems like it always rains on the days that we play, which, of course, high school baseball is different. But I coach my girls' t-ball team, and we've had so many games rained out this year. It just seems like every other game there's one rained out.
Well, it seems like Clark Range, all their district games, they played on Monday and Tuesday, which is their schedule. That's their schedule. Clark Range always seemed to play on Monday. It always rained on Monday. So they would move their game, play a doubleheader at the other school the next night. And it's just hard to make them up. But we did, I think, a total of 26 baseball and softball games.
That's still quite a bit, though,
Yeah.
ain't it?
We got a bunch in.
That's still a lot of running around, ain't it?
Absolutely.
What do you think is your most memorable game you've ever done?
Well, there was the year that York won the district in football, where they had a last second play. Jeff Williams caught a pass from little Larry Bruce Beatty, who threw it to him in the last second. The reason I'll set it up, but I'll give you a setup on it. They Smith County Owls led, and they, instead of trying to run the clock out, they ran out of the end zone and got a safety, which gave York 2 points. That made it a 6-point game. York comes up and hits a bomb at the last second. They go in for the touchdown, and that was a big one. And then there was the one where York went to the state semifinals when they were trailing with about 10 seconds to go, and they hit a touchdown to make it a 1-point game. Instead of going for one, they went for two, and they had a trick play. They used had three guys touched it before they threw it in the end zone, and Anthony Williams came down with that one, and York went on to the semifinals of the state that year, which was a big game. And in basketball, gosh, there's been so many state champions that we've seen. We've seen so many state championships. This year we saw Emma Pyle hit 15 3-pointers in a game. That was
crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was an exciting. I've seen Kelly Reed in Red Bull and Springs hit I think 13 in one night, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, there's just been a lot of games, a lot of championships. Basketball, you've got a lot more than maybe football and baseball. If you look at baseball, I'm thinking when York went to the state sub-state that a couple years ago was probably their biggest game we did, was when they won the district championship.
Yeah, you're definitely going to have more in our county in basketball and baseball, just because Clark Range doesn't have the football team. So you got less games, and football plays less games anyway. What's your favorite sport to announce?
Well, I'm gonna make everybody mad when I say this, but I'm a fan of football. I love doing York football. Gary Hall and I were talking about that the other day. He helps me do football and some of the basketball games, and we talked about what we could do, which one we'd do if we could only do one. I said, well, it'd definitely be York football. I'm a big fan of football, so it'd be York football.
So you just grow up a football guy?
Well, I actually not until I was up a little older, I started watching football and then got into it. And I don't know what it is about being on those Friday night lights, but it's just something else. It's just different.
Just a great atmosphere.
Absolutely.
That's another thing I was going to get into. What do you think just of the atmosphere of I feel like all the schools around here, everybody is so passionate, the fans, and they always just bring a great atmosphere to the games.
Yeah, most of the schools around here are really passionate about certain sports. Now, in some schools it's football, others it's basketball. Like Pickett County is definitely basketball. We did Pickett County for years on the cable down there as well. and it's definitely basketball there. And then you've got places like Gordonsville where baseball is the big thing. They've won several state championships. Down in around the Sequatchie Valley, it's girls softball. I mean, a lot of it depends on which area you're in and what school you're at. But York, Clark Range is definitely basketball. York, it's about 50-50 basketball and football.
Yeah, I feel like at York it just kind of depends on the year, really. Some years they have great basketball teams, and some years they have great football teams, and some years they have both, of course.
Yeah.
I remember one of the games I remember from, I guess it was a couple of years ago, York had that really good football team, and they were playing in the state semis a couple of years ago, and they mounted that big comeback. They come up a little short, but they had that big comeback toward the end of the game, and they come up short. But I remember watching that, and it's like I was ready for them to come back.
Yeah. That was one of those years we thought we had a shot at winning it all. We should have had a really good shot that year, a couple of years ago, when Miles Leffey was at quarterback, and you had Bryson Bilbrey and those guys. They were the kind of kids that you thought were going to make it. They just ran into a buzzsaw right at the very end. Same thing last year. Of course, they lost the eventual state champions last year.
Yeah, I had last podcast we had Mason Cravens on. He used to be York's quarterback, and he come on last podcast. Of course, he's a bodybuilder and stuff now. What, before starting the sports announcing, of course, you said Chris Berman. Is there anybody else that you listened to and that you kind of picked up on how they done it?
Well, I looked back at some of the careers of people like Ben Scully, who was a great broadcaster, and you had there were several of them back in the day.
Al Michaels.
Yeah, and some of those guys that are legends. You kind of steal from them, and then you got people that were. I don't like to say controversial, because some people say I'm a little bit controversial when it comes to some things I say, but like Howard Cosell and those that came in and did stuff that were completely different. And to me, when somebody looks at me and says, "Hey, I don't like football, but I love to listen to you call the games," because I never know what you're going to say. I mean, that I like that, because that brings in a whole different crowd into it.
Yeah, it kind of keeps people on edge and brings in the people, like you said, who aren't really interested. They're just kind of interested in the atmosphere that you bring to the listening.
Hey, some say they just want to see what I'm going to say next. And then, of course, you got the guys that have the drinking game. Yeah, every time I say something a little off color, they turn up a drink.
Oh, yeah?
So here's to you guys out there.
What's it like having Gary Hall as your co-announcer? Do you prefer to have a co-announcer? Have you always had one, or?
It depends on the sport. Now, in football, you really need one. Football is, you have so much time in between. And Gary Hall is, folks, he is like the Wikipedia of sports. The guy knows everything. He knows everything about every sport pretty much. He is one of the smartest individuals I've ever had help me. In basketball, it's a little fast-paced. Sometimes having somebody with you kind of gets you off the pace a little bit. But
sometimes when it's fast-paced like that, I guess it'd be hard for them to get in there, wouldn't it?
And when I did Tech basketball, I did color for the for WCTE. I did color for their basketball games. You have to learn when, if you're in that situation, when to talk, when not to talk. But in television, it's a lot simpler, because you have a little more time. People are actually watching it. But in radio, you've got to keep the action going continuously. You've got to keep talking continuously.
Yeah, in radio, you're the one painting the picture of the game. So you have to give them every detail that you can, basically.
Exactly. As you mentioned, like baseball and those sports, baseball you definitely need somebody with baseball. It is so slow paced, and softball too. It's so slow paced. You definitely need somebody as a side to help you with that as well.
Yeah, I guess in those slow paced sports like that, you got to have somebody else so you can kind of bounce back and forth off each other and fill in the silent moments.
Exactly. And then, of course, with wrestling, I had to have somebody there because I didn't know what to do.
Do you do anything with your voice? Do you practice like keeping your voice in shape?
No, not really. I attribute my longevity to hot tamales, folks. Yeah, that's what I eat a box of hot tamales during every ball game.
Really?
Yeah, and I know the York baseball managers this year. One of them looked at me and said, "How do you eat those things?" I said, "Well, I would use atomic fireballs, but they rattle in your mouth." I said, "So these things keep my throat consistent, and I don't." And I've actually had games. I did a tournament one year back when they used to play 4 games a night. I did a tournament with laryngitis. I had laryngitis when I started the game, and my voice actually got better as the games went on.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that, would you?
No, you would think it would get worse and worse, but you could barely hear me when I started, and I was fine by the end of it.
You've really not missed many games over your career, have you?
No, not many. I did have I had a spot back a few years ago where I had a allergic reaction to some medicine, ended up in the hospital, and I missed some of the start of one of the tournaments, missed a couple of games of that. And I had colon cancer about 3 years ago, had colon cancer surgery. I was out 10 days before I was back doing ball games.
That was a quick turnaround, wasn't it?
Yeah. When I went in to have the surgery, the doctor looked at me and said, he said, "You've got a cancerous." He said, you got a cancer. He said, "You got cancer in your colon." I said, "Okay." He said, "We need to do surgery." And I said, "Well," we're right in the middle of tournaments. He said, "What?" I said, we're in basketball tournaments. He said, "Listen," he said, "I'm talking life and death. You're talking basketball." I said, "Brother, you have never been to Fentress County."
That is life and death here, ain't it?
Exactly right.
if they don't have nobody to call their basketball games, they're going to riot.
Exactly.
What's it like going to the state tournament? How's that atmosphere calling from there?
Oh, I love Murphy Center. I've been there a lot the last few years. Of course, I went there several years with Clark Range, and York's been there the last several years. It's a completely different world, a different atmosphere than local gyms and stuff like that. It's just it's big time. They've got you've got rows of reporters from everywhere there, and it's a different world. It's a lot of pressure to put on you, and you go there and you try to do your A game, no doubt.
Yeah, you got to be just like the teams. You got to be on your best there, don't you?
Exactly.
Whenever you go to a place like that, are you still doing everything exactly the same when you prepare and just trying to make it as normal as possible, I guess?
Yeah, just try to keep your routine. That's the thing about it. It's all routine. If you call a game just a regular season game, you call a state game just like it. Just to try to be, make one as important as the other, because there's a lot of kids that never see the state tournament, and they want to be recognized just as much as the kids that make it to the state every year.
Is it the state tournament in basketball? Is it the same kind of atmosphere there as in like football, or is football a little different because you're kind of going, basketball, everybody's right on top of you and you're all in there. I assume football will be a little bit different.
Football, of course, you go to different locations, whereas basketball, they have all those pretty much jammed in one place. You've got a lot more crowd mostly at basketball games. But, being in the state, the atmosphere as far as being when you get to those upper levels of the state tournament, it gets you get those butterflies even at my age.
Were you calling games for that undefeated Clark Range team in like 08 or 09? Did you call those?
I did those when Kelly Reed and Molly Eddy and those girls went and won the state title. And actually, I made a deal with them after the game was over. I went in the press room, and as you can see, I'm follically challenged up here. I let them all sign my head. They all signed my head with magic markers, and Tori Lau signed it with a permanent magic marker right across my forehead, put her name right across my forehead. So I went around with Tori on my forehead for a few weeks.
What was that season like, looking back on it as it continued to grow, and when did they really start feeling like this could be something special?
Well, you get to about the midpoint of the season, you saw how these girls gelled. These girls gelled, and the chemistry was there. I mean, it was with Kelly Reed was playing, and Molly Heddy, Tori Lau, and the rest of them. They just seemed to gel right around the middle part of the season, and from that point on, you just knew that they were going to have a shot at going all the way to the state. Didn't know if they'd go undefeated or not, but it was a season that it's just hard to forget. I mean, it's one of those you very seldom ever see as an undefeated season.
Is that the only one you've ever been a part of?
Yeah, the only one I've ever been a part of. York's football was undefeated up until the semifinals year before last, but close, but didn't make it quite to the finals.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably the hardest thing in sports is to cap off an undefeated season.
Absolutely.
Never,
everybody's gunning for you.
Yeah, you never see that anymore. And one thing I hate about the state tournament in basketball is how I don't know, I feel like they just need to do different seating on it because I hate to see, and this has happened to the York girls, I think, just maybe a year or two ago, or maybe even this year, I can't remember, but where they have the state championship game in the first round, and it'll be a close game, but then after that team wins, they'll go blow them out 3 games in a row to win the state championship.
Yeah, York was, if not the best team last year in the state. They were the second best team, and they got Westview, who won the tournament in that first round, lost a heartbreaker in that one. And then this year they were the best team in this state tournament, but one call late in the game that got Reese Beatty out of it, and that really hurt the Lady Dragons, and they came up just short again this year.
Yeah, Reese Beatty, she's a special player, wasn't she?
Absolutely. I'd say she is one of the top 3 players I've ever seen play, and not to mention she's a 4-time shot put winner in the state and a 3-time discus winner as of yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that yesterday. That's crazy.
Yeah, she is a complete athlete.
Yeah, that just goes to show right there how much of an athlete when you can be a basketball star and then go win 7 other state championships.
Exactly. And then her sister had won the shot put the year before that she started. So her sister went for the last 5 years.
Wow.
We've renamed it the Beatty put. We don't call it the shot put anymore. It's the Beatty put.
I think that's appropriate for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I told her. I was telling Hunter the other day. I was like, we got to try to get her on the podcast.
Absolutely, she's a phenomenal girl, valedictorian of her class too. That's what amazes me. She's the valedictorian of her class. She's just an all around good athlete, good student. She's going to be really a big help to the Iowa State team. The Cyclones really going to need her.
Yeah, I think she's going to probably have a big career for them.
I told the York track coach yesterday after he called me and told me she won those 2 state championships. I said, how are they going to keep the Iowa State track coach away from her?
Yeah, really. I hadn't thought about that.
I mean, if I was there and I saw a kid that won 4 state championships in shot put and 3 in discus, I'd say, hey, basketball season only lasts so long.
Yeah, I would definitely be in on that.
Absolutely.
You'd be crazy not to if you were a coach.
Exactly. I would go talk to her at least.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Who do you think are some of the best players you've ever seen just across all the sports?
If I was in football, one of the best defensive players I ever seen was just a pure athlete was Josiah Headings. And then as far as offensively, it's hard to say. We've had some really good players this year, for example, you've got let's see, the young guy from Clark Range that played that went out there. I'm drawing a blank on his name. You've got some good kids like
you talk about like Logan Pinnell.
Logan Pinnell, yeah, he was he had some of the best vision of any kid I've ever seen run the football. And then you had Miles Leffey was a really heads up quarterback. His brother was a great quarterback. You've had Bryson Bilber was a good tight end. You've had some really good kids come down the line. I've seen them back to, Jeff Williams was a great player. Little Larry Bruce Beatty was a great player. I mean, I've seen a lot of really good players come through football at York. In basketball, if I was going to go my top 3 at Clark Range, well, this is going to make some people mad. But I would say probably one of the better players I've seen was Becky Reynolds. She came out, she played in the 80s. And then let's see, there would probably be Molly Hetty would be one. And I'm just going to say the best position player I've ever seen at Clark Range High School, Kelly Reed. Kelly Reed could play any position on the floor and play it well. So she'd be my pick. Now, if you go to York, you've got Reese Beatty, of course, stands out right off the bat.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And then you got Brandy Brown. Brandy Brown was a phenomenal player back in the 90s. She was really good. Kelly Cargyle was really good. It'd be hard to pick which one of those are the best. Brandy Brown had the size, and she could play any position on the floor. but I've never seen anybody quite as much basketball IQ as I have with Reese Beatty. She's got more basketball IQ than any kid I've ever seen.
Yeah, from what I've seen of her, it just seems like she makes the right play 99% of the time.
Exactly. You don't see her making bad plays, like
Yeah.
But like I said, and then Kelly Cargile, the only player that from York that's won a Miss Basketball, and she was the only York player that's got a state title, as a matter of fact, of the three.
Yeah, so that kind of definitely has to put you up there. What about on the boys' side?
On the boys,
Grant Dilatory.
yeah, Grant. I remember Grant was a great baseball player.
For 2 years in basketball and 4 years in baseball.
I remember the Clay County game in baseball where the coach had you turn around bat left-handed, and it made the Clay County fans so mad.
Oh, really?
You remember that one?
I remember batting left-handed.
Yeah.
I could switch it a little bit.
But they I think it was in the district tournament, they put you in as you were in there, and coach told you to turn around bat left-handed because he was walking all the left-handed batters.
Yeah. I think he might even hit me.
Yeah, and the Clay County fans went berserk because they kept sending you guys up there and having bat left-handed. That was one of those memorable games as well. Now in basketball,
We had some good baseball teams whenever I played.
absolutely. When Coach Roger was there, they had some really good baseball.
Yeah, he definitely knew how to coach. He was a good coach.
Absolutely. I remember Logan Beatty stealing home, winning the district tournament one year down in Jackson County. The one time we've ever traveled with baseball, we traveled to Jackson County to do this district championship, and Logan Beatty stole home to win the game.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Logan, he could play. He was a player. We had, that's why I tell people all the time, they ask me about our baseball teams. We're talking about baseball or something. And I think what made us so good at baseball, especially as a single A team, we just had so many guys who could pitch.
Yeah.
And that's just a huge thing in baseball, especially in single A, because
Absolutely.
you get a single A team, and most of them's only got really one good pitcher. And we had Logan Beatty, he could pitch. Edgar Parker could pitch. Stephen Henderson, Ty Crockett, Tyler Brown.
Yeah.
And I'm probably leaving a couple more out, but we had a bunch of guys who could pitch.
Yeah, that makes a world of difference in baseball. Of course, then you got kids that I've seen kids in baseball like Nick Smith. Nick Smith is your prototype college player.
Oh yeah.
If you wanted to design a college baseball player, it's Nick Smith. He was that kind of kid. And then you look at, and you mentioned basketball. I'm going to go back. I'm going to say one of the best players I ever seen play was Paxton Smith from York. He was one of the best players I've ever seen. From Clark Range, seen a lot of course, I did the Mike Buck era. I did when Mike Buck played, and they went to the
You got to say
state
Mike Buck, man.
semifinals. Yeah, Mike Buck, Kenneth Crouch, and those guys, they were good. In the last few years, well, I'm going to have to throw Hunter's name in there.
Yeah, Hunter, he was good. We'll have to give him credit.
And York's girls basketball coach, Michael Green, he was a great guard out at Clark Range. He played at Clark Range. He was a good player. Seen a lot of them come down through the area. It'd be hard to pick out one that I thought was best, but like I said, for York, I would have to go with Paxton Smith. Probably had the most talent of any kid I've seen. Of course, you had kids like, Nick Smith was a great basketball player. You've had several down the years that have been great, and you've had those years, of course, you've had down years too, like York struggled this past season because they had nothing but freshmen playing.
Mm-hmm. And you're gonna have that from time to time.
Oh yeah, and I did York girls. I did York girls when they won 2 games in 1 year. So
You've been in the good times and the bad.
Yeah.
Me and Hunter talk all the time about just around here in the Upper Cumberland area. There's just so many athletes, whether it's basketball or football or whatever. We talk all about basketball just because Hunter's a basketball guy, but just overall, we just have so many great athletes over there.
Yeah. I mean, between just in this district, there's been some really greats in both AA and single A. There's been greats coming from every school. I mean, Pickett County's had numerous great players. Nathan Aaron, for example, their current coach there was a great player.
Yeah, Eminette.
Yeah, so they've had great players there. And
somebody told me they talk about playing against Joseph Eminette and saying that's the best and smartest player they've ever played against in their life.
Yeah, he was a great player. I remember calling his games. I've called a lot of them down through the years. Clay County's had some tremendous kids.
Tyreek Key.
Yeah, Tyreek Key comes to mind right off the bat. But
We talk about Tyreek Key on here. We used to talk about him all the time on here. Me and Hunter. We said we're going to have to quit talking about Tyreek Key, but he deserves. I mean, he's playing in the G League for the Toronto Raptors right now.
I mean, he was a great player, and I've seen a lot of them come down the pike. I actually seen Penny Hardaway play in the state tournament against Clark Range at one time. So,
oh, really?
So Penny Hardaway was a great player, absolutely phenomenal to watch.
I remember I was at the end of the bench when the last time the Clark Range boys went to the state tournament, and we played against that Alex Fountain, and he was really good for Wartburg.
Absolutely.
But there's even been a lot of players, which a lot of those guys and people we've named off there, they've went to college and they've obviously been great. But even the guys who didn't go to college, we've had some great players who didn't. Like, just comes to mind for me, one of the best players I've ever seen is Garrett Stoltz.
Yeah.
I mean, Garrett, he could do it all, and he could score any way he wanted to and handle the ball. And then, of course, he didn't. I don't think he had some college offers, but he didn't have no interest in going and playing.
Yeah, some the burnout factor can hurt. I mean, when you get to that next level, you see a lot of kids get these scholarships to schools and they don't stay, but a couple of weeks they're ready to come home.
Yeah,
the burnout, and it's a different world when you get into college sports. It's a completely different world.
Oh yeah, we've had Hunter talk about that on here because he went to Maryville there for a couple of years, and he just talks about how he's just, like you said, just a whole different world when you get to that. Because when you get to college, in high school, you're the best player on your team and you're the guy. When you get to college, every one of those guys you're playing with was the best guy on their team.
Exactly. They didn't recruit them for enough.
Yeah.
And you mentioned coaches, of course. Yeah, one of Clark Range's one of the best players Clark Range ever had. I forgot to mention her earlier. Sorry, Monica. You're going to hate me for that. But Monica, Ashburn then was one of the better players in the state. She went on to college and played, coached down at Roan State. When I was doing the Roan State recap, she was the head coach there. She's a Clark Range girl. You've got Kelly Reed's coaching now. You've got Miranda Cravens is coaching now.
Brittany
Cooper's coaching, going to go down to Pickett County. And then you've got, I was trying to think of her name now. I'm drawing a blank. You can tell I'm getting old. I've seen too many kids come down the pike, but the Snow girl, Michelle, she's coaching down in Alabama, I believe it is. So
yeah, it's pretty crazy to look at that and say all them names like you just said right there, and you look at that and look at the Lamar Rogers coaching tree.
Absolutely, it's got a lot of branches.
Yeah, he's produced a lot of coaches out of there.
Absolutely.
What do you think about who's going to retire, you or Lamar Rogers first?
Well, I told him that I would try to stick around until he got that national record. So he's got a few years left to go with that. So I don't know, though. I'm getting pretty old. But, I've seen a lot of things throughout the years, no doubt about it. But seeing him get his 1,000th win was great, and him taking over as the winningest coach in Tennessee, I mean, that was great as well. And I'm looking forward to him. Hopefully, he'll stay long enough to get that national record.
Yeah, hopefully have it in the next couple of years. I think he's just 50 wins away, wasn't it?
Something like that. It's not a whole lot.
Yeah, 2 or 3 more years, he should be able to lock that up.
And his granddaughter wants him to keep coaching until she's through, and she's a 6th grader, so he's got 6 more years anyway.
Speaking of coaches there, of course, Coach Rogers, his name's always going to come up in some of the best coaches. Who do you think some of the best coaches you've seen?
Oh, by far, one of the best coaches I've ever seen, this is really going to make the Clark Range people unhappy, is Rob Edwards from Clay County. He's one of the best coaches I've seen in the game. And then you got Brent Smith from down Pickett County. He's one of the better coaches. Charles Smith, that we used to be at Pickett County years ago when I first started, great coach. Brent Smith, he was a great coach down there at Pickett County as well. Let's see, you've got, and this is really going to make York fans happy, Dana McWilliams from Upperman's been really a great coach. Her husband Bobby's a good coach. I've seen a lot of good coaches. Danny Bond out of DeKalb County. You've got as far as basketball, there's several great coaches. Coach Larry Bruce Beatty was a great coach. You had a great coach in Lee Lander. You had a lot of really good coaches. Sam Beatty was one of the, he has the one York state title, so he's
got to be up there then.
Yeah, he's one of the great coaches. But Coach Michael Green, what he's done with the York program in these last few years is amazing. I mean, I was there before he took over, and we were mediocre to say the best, and now they're one of the premier teams in the state, and got some great kids coming back. They got a good chance at doing well. He's done well. Coach Rodney Powell, he's had a chance. He's struggled at some this last year because he was so short of players, but I've seen him take kids and tournament time turn them into winners. There's just been a lot of them down the years that I've seen, so many out of these other schools as well. Greg Bibb from down at Gordonsville is a really good coach. You've got
he started out at Pickett County, didn't he?
Yeah, he was at Pickett County at one time, at Van Buren County one time, and there's been a lot of coaches that Larry White from Red Bull and Springs. Larry White was a legend, then went to Macon County and won state titles with Macon County. Great coach, great guy too as well. Thomas Watson. You got Joe Sims. Better not leave Joe Sims out. I actually did a tournament game. Guys from Clay County, they do a live stream of their games. Well, they had a guy out, and they asked me to step in for him. And I'm not sure how that went over to hear me doing the Clay County game. But Joe Sims was my color guy for that one, and I just he's amazing. He knows a lot about basketball.
I feel like all these coaches you've named off and all these great coaches, whenever they get into coaching, they coach for basically the rest of their life, don't they? I mean,
exactly.
you don't really hear about a coach coaching for 10 years and quitting.
Yeah. Unless it's one of these that they force. Now, there's been a lot of coaches, these schools will say, hey, we don't have anybody do this, you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been one of the problems with the Clark Range baseball program.
Yeah.
They've had numerous coaches over the last few years, and you've got to have some consistency. And I'm hoping the McWhorter guy that's there now, I'm hoping he stays a while. He done a pretty decent job with them this year. And, York's got theirs solid out with Tamara Sweet, and you've got in softball, and you got Adam Bowden in baseball. Theirs is pretty solid. And I'd like to see Clark Range's softball, which is now going to have a new coach next year as well, but I'd like to see them stabilize and get somebody in there that can just stay with it for several years.
You got to get somebody in there who's passionate about it and who loves it. That's one thing you got to give Coach Webb credit for on the baseball side.
Absolutely.
There is not a man out there in the world, I don't think, that loved baseball like Coach Webb loved baseball.
Yeah, he was definitely dedicated to it. He was a good coach, and I mean if you look at Clark Range and how it looks now, the baseball field, folks, you wouldn't believe before Coach Webb got there.
That's what I was about to say.
It was a shambles, the field and everything. I mean,
fence was falling over and all that, and then he took great care of it.
Absolutely, and he built the Big Blue Monster, and hopefully they'll keep up that tradition and keep working at it. As they need new press box and new concession stand. I'll tell you a funny story about the press box. This is one of those stories I'll never forget. 2 years ago, I was doing a baseball game at Clark Range. I had my hotspot mounted on the wall. Well, all of a sudden, I hear it fall over. Well, I'm reading my stuff, so I'm reaching up here trying to put it back up with my other hand. Look up, and this snake had come down from the rafters and it knocked my hotspot over, and it was dodging my hand like it's leave me alone, buddy. What are you doing? But it had knocked over, and I said, folks, I'm going to say something I thought I would never say in my life. I'm going to have to stop this ball game and get this snake off my queen.
That is crazy.
Yeah, and it went down the side and went down a hole beside me there. So we kept doing the ball game. I was going along, and all of a sudden we hear screaming. And all these women are running out of the concession stand. The snake falls through the ceiling and lands in the sink.
Oh, my gosh.
And they go tearing out screaming and yelling. I mean, it was probably one of the funniest experiences I've had doing a ball game.
I'd say so. That's crazy.
Yeah. And we went to Allgood one time doing a 8th grade football game. We did the crush football, the junior high football. Well, we opened up where the plug-ins were at. They said, go over there and just open up the plug-ins. It's right there. Well, evidently they hadn't opened it in years. it was full of wasp. My guy that was in front of the camera got stung all over. I didn't get stung, but he got stung all over. And we had to finally get something and kill all them before we could even hook up and do the game. We couldn't even do the ball game till we got all the wasps killed.
They wasn't used to having nobody call the game, was they?
No, they had definitely not had anybody there in a while.
It's 1,000 wonders when you was grabbing at that snake, you didn't reach over and just grab a hold of it.
Well, I mean, it was dodging me great. It was looking at me like, hey, would you leave me alone? I mean, and finally, after I quit grabbing at it and I went to get something to kind of get it out of the thing, I went down to the concession stand, got a broom, and I was going to just kind of herd it out the door because I'm not a big snake fan. I ain't going to lie to you. I'm not a big snake fan. So it went down the hole beside me, but yeah, I mean, I think I bothered it more than it bothered me.
I guess the women in the concession stand, they weren't big snake fans either, were they?
June Warden, I think, lost about 10 years off of her life that day.
I'd say so.
June, I'm calling you out on that one.
One thing I wish they would, and it's really hard to figure out, but I wish they'd figure out with it. Sometimes when I watch like the Facebook Lives of the baseball games and stuff like that, is the backstop netting. It's hard to get the video, and I'm sure it's harder on you up there broadcasting too to see.
Well, luckily now, if you get to watch any of our games, we actually mounted a camera on the post. We have a camera inside the field now, and the picture is amazing now that from what it was before.
Yeah,
we've got that at every one of the baseball and softball parks now. We've got
that's awesome. I didn't watch no games this season of it, but I remember like I guess it was last year I was watching them and I was like, that's why I wasn't watching them. I was like, can't really watch them.
Yeah, look at the last ones we done, especially this year. That we didn't get the Clark Range one in until that last district game, that first district game when it got put out. We had it in there for that one, and we did the softball games. The videos are just amazing compared to what they were before.
Yeah, that's
we
great.
Put a stationary camera up and run cords in to hook our equipment up, so we don't have that looking through. At Clark Range, the funny part was you had a screen right there at the press box. Then you had the actual netting behind the thing, so your camera was trying to filter through all of that. And then during the game, you would have like bugs. They had a really bad problem with flies at Clark Range High School for a while, and they would get on there and they would get in front of the screen. It looked like a monster.
Yeah, I've seen them like that on there before.
I had a guy that he was watching the game. He said, "Guys, I couldn't watch the game." He said, "My cat wouldn't leave the TV alone." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, he kept trying to catch those flies." He said, "I couldn't get it away from the TV screen." But hopefully, that's a thing of the past.
Do you have somebody, because I'm sure whenever you're announcing, you're focused on the game. Do you have somebody who's kind of making sure everything else on the viewer side of it is running good?
Well, now the camera work, the camera guy takes care of all the camera stuff as far as.
So he kind of knows if on the viewer's end if it's something's wrong with it or not.
Yeah, he's kind of watching it on. He watches it on a computer while he's doing the game. That way, if there's any remarks or he sees it mess up, he can do something. We've had a lot of trouble with York because they went to the NFHS network, which is a struggle sometime to get on. They actually told us our equipment was too sophisticated for theirs, but I'm not sure how you could be a little radio station in Jamestown and be more sophisticated than a national network.
Yeah, that don't sound like right. That sounds like they're cheaping out or something is what it sounds like to me.
It just sounds like they're making excuses, but
yeah.
But we finally figured out how now to do it, and we don't have as much problem. But it was a problem for a while to do some of those games on NFHS network.
Is your camera guy, is he listening to the broadcast too and making sure everything's straight on that end?
Yeah, I feed him all the audio, and of course I have a computer there that I actually run the radio station.
Yeah.
And I do everything from that as far as running the radio and my audio. He takes the audio into his camera, and he monitors the computer and his headset as well, and seeing what's coming into the camera, and and making sure everything's balanced. And I'm not, because people say I get excited and sometimes a little too loud, get a little distorted, but
that's just part of being a sports announcer.
That's right. You got to have fun doing it. If you don't have fun doing it, there's no sense doing it.
All the best calls you ever hear in history, they've all been excited. No call will ever be remembered that they didn't get excited about.
Exactly.
That's what one of the announcers I like listening to the most is the ones who do the horse races.
Yeah.
Those horse racing guys, whenever they get coming down that final stretch and they're calling everything out. Those are just, they're all excited and jumping around and getting into it.
And surprisingly, a lot of the most boisterous ones are soccer announcers. Now, I've never announced a soccer game. I will admit I've never announced a soccer game. But some of those guys get really excited, and I'm thinking that's because there's so little to get excited about.
Oh yeah, when they score a goal on their goal, they're holding it out for 10 minutes.
Exactly, trying to get as much milk as much of it as you can.
Which I guess, like you said, you have to if it's a 2-1 game and it's been 90 minutes
of just people running up, backing up and down the
up and down. What is the most? Have you done any kind of unique thing that you've announced for?
Well, like I said, I did wrestling this year. Was the first time I'd ever done a high school wrestling match. But I used to be the public address announcer for the Tennessee Express football team. They were a semi-pro football team out of Cookeville. I used to do that, and I really enjoyed doing that. It was a lot of fun doing that, and and watch those guys play during the summer. It was a lot of fun. That was one of the most unique things I've done as far as sportscasting goes.
Are they still around? Or
no? They actually moved all that to Nashville, and they do all that in Nashville now.
What's the farthest you've traveled to do some announcing?
Let's see. We went to Milan one year for the sub-state or the semifinals of the state football team. We got on a Greyhound bus with all the fans and all the cheerleaders, and it took us. We left at 10 o'clock in the morning, got back 4 o'clock the next morning.
Wow, that was an adventure, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Not a pleasant adventure either because we got hammered, but it would have been nice if we would have at least won. And then you mentioned the strange ones. One of the strangest games I've ever had in softball this last season, 35-34 was the final. York beat Oliver Springs 35-34. There was 17 hits in the ball game total. Game took 3 hours and 45 minutes. It was one of the longest softball games I've ever seen in my life.
That's insane.
Yeah, the final score was 35-34.
They kept you on your toes that game, didn't they?
Well, yeah, it was one of those that you – at the end, I said, folks, I don't know what else I can say. I mean, we're just going to have to let you watch this one.
Yeah, that's something else. You don't never say that in baseball or softball.
No. That's more like a football score right there.
That's got to be some kind of record or something, you would think.
Yeah, I mean, some of the media wrote in there the box score of the century, and they showed that, and I thought, no, you didn't sit through the 3 hours, 45 minutes, or you wouldn't have said that.
So we've talked about the sports announcing, but you also do some DJing and stuff on WDEB, correct?
Yeah, I work evenings. I do the evening shift, and I do. Of course, I'm the news director too. I go to do a lot of news. I've done trials and cases of murder or different types of. I've done everything from murder cases to molestation cases. I've covered all that stuff, and let's just say over the years, I've seen things that people probably should never say.
What approach do you take to that? Because, of course, in the sports announcing, you're getting excited, you're getting into it. But when you're reporting on a murder or stuff like that, you can't do the same emotions with your voice that you do on the sports.
Exactly. When it comes to news, you have to be straightforward. You got to bring the facts. You got to, you've got to make sure you get everything exactly right because people are listening, and they'll and even some of the times the people that are in trial are listening, and they, you get a lot of enemies that way. I mean,
oh yeah, people. If you mess up on any kind of anything, especially now with the social media world, somebody's out there is going to find it out, and they're going to call you out on it and come after you about it.
I went to my uncle's funeral in Iowa back last fall, and this lady that was related to us asked me, she said, "What do you do for a living?" I said, I'm the news and sports director. She said, "What's the worst thing you've ever seen?" And I started describing some of the things I've seen. And she looked at me when she started leaving. She said, she told my sister, she said, "We'll see you later and goodbye." She looked at me and she said, "I hope you have a better rest of your life."
You scared her to death, didn't you?
I told her, I said, "Ma'am," I said, I'm the one who chose this. I said, "If it's my fault," I said, "ain't nobody blame but me."
Well, we'll just piggyback off of that. What is probably the worst story you ever had to cover?
Oh, let's see. I've covered a lot. Now, the worst I would say would be the one where the son beat his mother to death with a claw hammer. That was probably the worst one. And I've seen, I've been to wrecks. I've been to really bad wrecks. I actually, 1 year after the 127 sale, when Walmart used to be where Tractor Supply is now in James.
I remember that when I was real little.
There was a couple that came to the 127 sale on 1st of August, and their camper malfunctioned. Well, they asphyxiated in their vehicle, and they were in there for probably 2 weeks before anybody called, and they went and checked. Well, they said, it's dead. So I went up to cover it, and they said, go on in, Gary. So I walk in, and let me tell you, folks, when you smell a dead person that's been dead for a couple of weeks in 100-degree temperature, you never forget that smell. Never forget that smell.
Oh, I'd say so.
When I think about it, to this day, I can smell that smell.
Yeah, that's got to be rough.
So I've seen a little bit of everything, though, as far as news. And when you're in the news, you just have to report it as best you can, not take either side, and try to give both sides of everything.
Yeah, let people make their own decisions on it.
Well, I know back when the hospital closed in Jamestown, for example, the guy that owned the hospital would not speak to the media, would not speak to anybody. And I called him and left him a message saying, I want you to give your side of the story. I said, because I don't believe in giving just one side of the story. Well, I was the only person he would interview with. He wouldn't interview with any of the TV stations, newspaper, anybody. He called me and said, I'll do an interview with you. And we did an interview, and, a lot of people got upset that we gave his point of view on it. But I'm old school news. And old school news, you're not right side, left side. You're right straight down the middle. And if you deviate from that either way, then to me, you're pulling the news wherever you want it to go. Mm-hmm. I try to give both sides of it. And it caused a lot of people to be upset. And, he explained his part of it, and I asked him the questions. I said, one of the questions I asked him, I said, well, if you ever open again, I said, how's anybody ever going to trust you? I come at him with the questions that people want to know, and it's just, you've got to give both sides. You can't just be one-sided with anything.
Yeah, if you start being biased in the media, you're going to get labeled as this or that, and then half the people in the world's going to hate you.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the news is probably a little bit harder and a little bit more complicated to get through than the sports. I mean, sports is fun. It's all about fun. Mm-hmm. When news is not about fun, not the news that I cover anyway. Some you get good news stories. I'm not going to say there's not good news out there, but the bad news, when you see it a lot, you kind of become numb to it. And I'm that way. It doesn't bother me. People say, how do you sleep at night after seeing that? I say, you can't take it home with you.
Yeah.
You just got to let it go.
And I guess after you see that much stuff, nothing really surprises you anymore.
I once said the cruelty of man never ceases to amaze me because of the things I've seen. That's part of news, though. If you get in the news business, that's part of it. You just got to be ready to take the good and the bad.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of maybe on a different swing now, but for the longest time, and it's still like that, it still leans that way, that the bad news, it sells better than the good news.
Yeah, what's the old saying that a dog biting a man is not news, but if a man bites a dog, it's headlines. So I hate to say it, but sex, violence, that's what sells. That's what people want to hear. And it's sad that our society's like that, and that's why you don't lead the news with good stories.
Yeah.
You try to wrap up your news with some good stories to try to kind of counteract the bad stuff.
Yeah, you got to make up for all the bad that you put out there. You got to end it on something good so people will feel good when they get done with it.
But people want to know the news as it is, and that's the thing about news. You've got to be straight down the middle. You can't lean one way or the other, or politically one way or the other. You got to stay right down the middle, or you're not really news. You're just propaganda for one side.
That's one thing about sports is it brings everybody together.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter what you believe politically, religiously, anything.
Yeah.
If in sports, it brings everybody to one common goal of supporting that local team.
Exactly. And plus, people want to have something good to cheer about. I mean, you want to be this day and age. Everybody needs a little release from daily life, and that's what I feel that sports is. Sports is kind of a release from, having to worry about work, worrying about what you're going to cook for supper or whatever. I mean, it gives you a little bit of a break. It kind of gives you something to take your mind off the bad stuff.
Especially in a small town like we're in. In a small town like this where there isn't really a whole lot to do and a whole lot going on, the sports take precedent over a lot of things.
Exactly. I know a lot of people complain. The people that move here from other places. I'm not putting down anybody that's moved in here, folks. So don't start sending me any letters or emails. But a lot of those folks don't understand the tenacity that these fans have here that are from here for like Clark Range basketball, York football, York basketball. When you've got those fans that have been here, that have been fans for all their lives of this schools, they grew up watching these schools. They don't quite understand the tenacity and the fact that they let out schools go to state tournaments and stuff.
Yeah, they think that's odd.
Yeah, they don't understand that, and that's part of that small town life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you come from a big city, especially if you're not a sports person, then you didn't care nothing about that high school because you probably had 3 or 4 high schools within a close range of you. And if you didn't care about sports, you definitely didn't care about that. But around here, I feel like even the people who don't really, they're not really a big basketball fan. They're not going to go watch college basketball or the NBA or college football or the NFL or whatever. They still, a lot of them that show up on Friday night for football and support the kids, the local kids, because they know their parents or they know their grandparents and they've been around them outside of the sports. They're around them at home, or it's the kids that are working at the local businesses.
Or go to church with them.
Yeah, or go to church with them or anything like that. They have a connection with them that goes beyond the sport.
High school sports to me and local sports is more of a social thing than it is a actual, college anymore is big money. Mm-hmm. It's just, who's got the most money gets the best players. NBA is street basketball made legal. That's all.
That's what we've talked about that on here before about the NBA. Is the NBA, those guys don't even really start playing and definitely don't start playing defense until they get to the playoffs.
Exactly.
And then they'll play a little bit in the playoffs.
Yeah, to me, it's I'm not a big NBA fan, but, to me, the professional sports, and now that college has become pretty much a professional sport, I mean, you're making millions of dollars at the University of Tennessee to be a quarterback, and you don't think you're getting enough money. I'm not calling anybody out, Nico. But, when you do that, when you can do that, it's gone beyond sports. It's gone to just a business. And that's why I think that the younger kids people like to go to T-ball games. They're not going out there to watch some great athlete at a T-ball game. They're going to watch their grandkid hit and have fun. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing about it. I try to put fun into sports. I used to do a weekly radio program that was a statewide program called the Friday Night Thunder, which was a call-in thing for sports, for high school sports. Well, I would always be the comedic side of it. I would always say something funny, and make the guy laugh. And one night, the guy come on before me, and they lost a football game, and he was the broadcaster for that team. Oh, and he was almost in tears. And they said, that guy be on there, and I said, guys, is that guy that went for me okay? I said, I thought maybe somebody run over his dog. I said, because he sounded like the world was coming in. I said, it's just a game, folks. It's just a game.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who don't get that too about, like, even in the T-ball, which not on my T-ball, but I do know some people that I feel like they just take it too seriously. Like, if you're out there with 4 to 6 year olds, you want to teach them something, but it's really kind of like you said before, it's more social. It's more the social aspect of them getting around other kids and having fun with other kids and learning how to interact with the other kids than it is them learning how to hit a home run. So my goal at the start of this year's T-ball season, I've been doing it for like 3 years now, but to keep them on their side of the field because they all want to run after the ball. It don't matter where it's hit. They all want to run and try to tackle each other or something. And so I've kind of got them broke from that. They don't really tackle each other now. And then just keep them running the bases correctly, and they can run the bases good. And then we've got, they're getting old enough now. We've taught them we try to get them to throw the ball to first base. You know, they field the ball, they throw it to first base, just kind of learning the simple stuff.
Very basic.
Yeah, but we're not out here trying to get them to turn a double play or try to get them to hit it over the fence or whatever, and we're not yelling at them to run, do this or whatever, you know. And I've heard some parents, not on my team and not this year, but in the past couple of years, I mean, one team had a parent on their team, and I was talking to my wife. I mean, they both noticed it. I'm sure everybody there noticed it. And he's like jumping on his kid about doing this and telling him to hurry and all this stuff. It's like, buddy, we're not even keeping score. It doesn't matter.
The strangest thing I ever seen, and my niece was a coach in Cumberland County for a while for a T-ball team. She was saying, she said, we're getting ready for tournaments. I said, what? She said, yeah, we have tournaments over here. I said, you have T-ball tournaments? I didn't think they kept score. She said, yeah, we do. And they were teaching these kids to try to win a tournament at 4 and 5 years old. I'm like, you're going to burn these kids out. You're going to put so much pressure on them when they're that young. When they get up to 10, 11 years old, they're going to be done with it. I mean, you can burn a kid out real early if you get them too heavy real early. My daughter used to coach a little peewee soccer team, and she would never get on to her kids. It's always you're doing good, you're doing good. She had one kid that sat down and started picking flowers during the game. I mean, it was just, but she didn't jump onto them and get onto them. But
that's the thing about younger kids. I feel like it's not as much about the technical side of the game. It's about the love of the game. It's about getting them to love the game. Like I like to play golf, and I've got my youngest daughters. I've taught them how to hit a golf ball and stuff, and I'll take them to the course with me every once in a while and let them play. But I always love to take them out for ice cream or take them out for some kind of treat afterwards, or we'll go to, if the clubhouse has a restaurant in it or something, we'll go sit down in there and eat. And they think that's just the greatest thing ever. And it's kind of just instilling that love of it. You know, you want to make them, you don't want them to feel the pressure, like you said. You want it to be a happy thing for them. And I feel like if you put that in them, it'll be something they'll want to do for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. I mean, if you pressure a kid a lot, I mean, I've seen kids, they'll cry when they lose a tournament game or a little league game or something like that. They'll just break down, and I'm thinking that's too much pressure on these kids. Winning's not that important at this age. What you want to do is you want to get them fundamentally sound for when they get to the next level. Then if they want to play, they're ready to play. But if you're making it so hard on them when they're younger, they're not going to play when they get older. They're not going to stick it into the game.
And people probably think like what I said there. They'll be like, well, you're just not competitive or something. And you can ask anybody who knows me. I'm the most competitive person. If we're playing Go Fish, I want to beat you and I want to blow you out. I mean, I want to smoke you. I'm the most competitive person there is out there. But you've got to save that competitiveness for the right time.
Exactly.
Because, like you said, it'll burn them out. And I feel like that's kind of getting to be a problem, which maybe not around here as much, but just nationally. And I'm not knocking them, but you see like all those travel ball that people spend a ton of money on, and they go to these travel all over the country and play games for these young kids. And they think it's getting them that exposure and getting them all that, and which it may be in a way, but the way I look at it, if you're good enough, they're going to find you.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the next Babe Ruth out there, they're going to find you. If you just play your high school games at Clark Range and you're one of the best players in the country, somebody's going to hear about you. Somebody's going to come there, and they're going to find you.
Yeah, travel ball is great if you're one of the elite athletes. But if you're one of the elite athletes, you might get some exposure there. But if you're a mediocre athlete and you're just going in there and you're sitting on the bench or maybe playing a minute out of a game or something, then
you're paying for somebody else.
Yeah, you're paying for somebody else to play pretty much. That's it. I've got nothing against travel ball. I know it's helped kids. Some kids take for example Nick Smith. He played that high level, and when he got to high school, he played that high level stuff in travel ball, and it helped him get some scholarships that he probably wouldn't have got looked at by some SEC teams playing at York. Mm-hmm. But and some kids actually need that, playing year round just to keep their abilities up. Because I know when I played, of course, there was no such thing as travel ball. When summer come around, I didn't do much. I was lazy.
Yeah, and just some people need that little bit of break, though, to kind of reset so they don't get burnt out on it. But I just think it's not really about the travel ball. I mean, travel ball's fine. There ain't nothing wrong with it. It's about the people who take it too seriously.
Oh, yeah. That's a bad problem.
Yeah, that's the real issue with it. It's not the travel ball in itself or going and playing. If that's what you like to do, it's the people who get tore up over it.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of people. Like I said, you get people that scream and yell at T-ball players. They'll scream and yell at little league players. When I grew up, I was playing high school baseball and little league and all that. We had a mom that stayed on her kid all the time, and then he struggled after he got up. He didn't want to play anymore. He said, I'm tired of this.
Yeah, and you lose a lot of people who could have been great athletes that way, and that also goes into not even just the parents. If you get a bad coach, there's a lot of bad coaches out there who ruin players and make it where the player doesn't want to play.
Exactly. You got some that are just, I guess I call it fanatic. That's probably not the right term for it, but you got some that are just over exuberant, to say the very least. They really, really want to win at any cost. And I've seen coaches that'll do anything to win, and it instills in those kids that winning's everything. It's not having fun, not doing your best. It's if you don't win, you're nothing.
Or on the other side of it, you get the coaches who don't care about winning, but they've got their kid playing.
Exactly.
And they just care about their kid, just say in a basketball game, taking every shot and doing all this and that. And you've got other kids that are good, but they see that and they're like, what am I even doing here? Why am I even trying if it's just going to be all about that kid?
And, of course, you've got the generation that's coming up that everybody gets a trophy. I harp on that a lot, folks, but everybody gets a trophy. That is, makes a generation that, to me, that doesn't try as hard. Mm-hmm. They know they're going to get a trophy anyway. They're going to try as hard.
And that makes them feel kind of entitled in some ways, too, thinking they deserve this, even though they didn't do anything to deserve it. And that goes outside of sports. Then you get people like that just out in the world thinking the world owes them something.
Exactly right.
And that's, like you said, that's become a real problem, I feel like.
I don't know. It's a completely different world from when I grew up, of course, I played in the 70s, folks. That's how long ago it was I played. But it was a different world back then. I mean, people don't realize it. I'll talk to these kids today and I'll say, when I was in high school, girls played 6-on-6 basketball. And they said, what's that?
I remember I've heard my Aunt Cheryl talking about playing. I think she played with Coach Rogers when he was first starting out. I believe he started out coaching 6-on-6.
Yeah, he did. He started coaching 6-on-6. It was a completely different world than basketball today. And I remember when they went to 5-on-5 was when I was a junior. Of course, you mentioned Cheryl May. Cheryl May was one of the better players in the state as well when she was in high school. She was one of those that could have been if they'd had regular 5-on-5, she might have went on and played somewhere too, because it kind of stifled you if you were like a defensive player.
Yeah.
Because you never shot the basketball.
Yeah, that's what, and I believe that's what she was, wasn't it, from what I've heard?
Yeah.
Yeah, they said she was great, though, is what I've always heard. But yeah, that was that 6-on-6, I guess, for the people who haven't really heard about it. That's where they played. 3 people stayed on defense all the time.
Absolutely. You had three. You had 6 on each end. You had 3 defense, 3 offense on each end. If you stopped and didn't score and you got the rebound, you took it to the center line. You had to give it to somebody on the other side on the offense, and then they started 3-on-3. It's like 2 ends of 3-on-3 basketballs.
Yeah, 2 half-court games of 3-on-3.
Yeah, it was a completely different world.
Were they, when they were playing like that, were there still subs? Were they subbing people?
Yeah, they would have subs and stuff in the game still. I mean, you get people in foul trouble and stuff like that, but it was a lot slower. It was a slow-paced game, I mean, because you have to, every time you got a rebound, you had to drive up to the center line, stop, throw it, and wait for somebody to get open.
And the defense was already set up. There wasn't no fast breaks or anything like that.
And when you scored, they took it to mid-court, and you brought it in from mid-court. You brought it in on your offensive end on the mid-court if the other team scored. And it's just people, of course, my mom, she played that when she was in Iowa. She was a high school player in Iowa, and that's the way they played in Iowa. I was the last state to go 5-on-5.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they were the last state to do that. But, yeah, Tennessee played that up until I was a sophomore in high school when they changed to go 5-on-5.
I guess you probably remember when they put the 3-point line in, too, then.
Yeah, there was no 3-pointers when I played. Not at all, unless you – that's why people ask me, say, why do you say the old-fashioned or the natural 3 when you get a and one, when you get fouled when you're shooting and get an and one? I said, that's the only natural 3-pointer there was. I said, the 3-point line came in later.
Yeah, I guess a lot of people, I never really thought about that because I'm of course, a big basketball fan, and I've watched all that old stuff and stuff like that, so I know what you're talking about. Yeah. But I guess a lot of younger people, they don't even think about there ever not being a 3-point line.
Exactly. It's just they've known it 3-point line all their lives. And I don't remember what year it was, but see, when I played, folks, I'll tell you how old I am. They would not let you dunk the basketball. It was illegal to dunk a basketball.
Really?
In the 70s. You could not dunk a basketball. So that was just some of the rules that's changed, and basketball's changed so much.
That hurt you then, didn't it, your game? Cause
yeah, I was a slam dunk freak, folks.
Yeah, that took all your game away right there.
Exactly right. But yeah, it was a completely different world back then, and I mean, today's game. I guess I'm old school. I like the inside play, the tough play inside. I don't like for come down and shoot 3-pointers every time down the floor. That's why I don't like NBA basketball. That's what they do.
That's what it's all about now is a 3-pointer, and it's trickling down to the smaller levels too. Me and Hunter talk about that sometime. It's just really changed. It's all about the 3 now. It feels like even when I was in school, 2012 through 2016, I mean, we had 3-point shooters like Hunter. He was always a great 3-point shooter, but we had big guys too. I mean, we had Landon and Ronnie, and we had it where you work into the post and let one of them post up and score. You don't see that a lot now.
No. You see a lot of times they take it into the post to throw it out for somebody to shoot a 3. Mm-hmm. And it's changed the game completely but back when they didn't have the 3-point, then the 3-point line, it was all, you tried to work it into your big guy and let your big guy score.
Yeah, there wasn't no sense in shooting it out deep then when you could get it into a big guy and him lay it in.
And it's changed basketball. I mean, I'm sounding like I'm 100 years old, folks. Back when they used peach basket. But yeah, it's different now than it was, and even NBA basketball is so much different now than it was. Back years ago, back during the 70s, they had the stupidest thing in basketball ever in the NBA. It was called 3 to make 2. If you got fouled, you got 3 foul shots to hit 2. If you hit the first 2, you didn't get the third one. But if you missed one, you got 2 more to shoot to get 2 free throws. I mean, it was.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, that was one of the rules back in the 70s that they wanted to get more scoring. They were worried about not enough scoring in the NBA.
Yeah. And
nowadays they score what? 150 points a night.
Oh yeah, I mean it's not surprising to see a 130 to 120 game.
Yeah, exactly. And now back then though, it was one of those games where it was like 70 and 80 points a night was most teams ever scored. So
I feel like back then too, watching like the guys playing in the 80s and 90s, they were so much more physical back then than they are now, especially in the regular season. Like in the regular season back then, they still played and they push you around and stuff. And now, like I said before, you really only see that in the playoffs.
Yeah, and in football, it's changed so much. I mean, they've made so many rules now about hitting it. You can't hit somebody.
Yeah, I hate that. I hate all that.
When I played high school baseball, and I've said this many times when we were doing games, if it's a close play at the plate or somewhere like that, when I was playing, I hope you had your chin strapped on because I was going to put my elbow right up into your nose because I was going to run over you.
Oh, yeah.
You do that now, you throw it out of the game. I mean, it doesn't work anymore.
Well, that famous play from Pete Rose in the All-Star game, he run that guy over in the All-Star game. They'd put you in jail for that now, wouldn't they? They would have charged him with assault.
They'll throw you out of the game quicker than anything. I mean, you can't. I mean, it's changed so much.
People are a lot more sensitive now about things, I feel like.
I mean, I understand them trying to protect players and all that, especially in football, but some of the rules they've got where you can even, I mean, if you even touch a quarterback anymore, you're going to get a flag if he lets go of the football.
That's one of the things in football I hate seeing is when the D lineman gets back there and gets a sack, but they come down on him and they call that you can't put your weight on him. You can't fall on top of him. They want you to roll to the side after you bring him down, and then they'll call a penalty on you.
Yeah, it's they've put in so many rules that they've kind of these players today. I mean, I'm going to sound really old now, but back in the 70s. And those eras when they played back when, say, the Miami Dolphins went undefeated that year, these bunch, they could not play that football, that style of football, that old Larry Zonka right in the middle, lower your head and run over people. It would never work today. It's just today's the NFL and stuff like that is all going to, we want pass. It's all pass oriented.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Up and down.
It's really devalued the running back. Nowadays, I mean, you've still got great running backs like Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley, but it's devalued them because they don't use them as much as they used to use them. And now you can just go, there's a lot of fast guys out there who can carry a football who ain't going to cost you $25 million a year like a Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley. And you can get a guy for cheap. So the teams look at that and they're like, we can go out here and get two great wide receivers because we're going to throw it more. And we'll just buy a cheap running back for nothing. And then of course the running backs burn out usually after like 5 to 8 years for an average one, I would say.
At least.
Yeah, maybe not even that long for most of them. And it's just and the same thing goes back to the NBA. Like before, back when you played the post-up game, the center was so valuable. But now, if you've got a center that can't shoot a three, you're at a disadvantage.
Exactly. And if in football, if you take a look, if you ever get a chance, watch the Nashville Cats arena football, and you'll see what football's become. Football's become a game of scoring. They want lots of scoring. These old defensive games back in the day when it was you won 7-0, they don't want that in the NFL anymore. They want like the Nashville Cats. I watched them play couple weeks ago, the arena football, and they put up like 70 points and still lost. I mean, that's what people want to see. People want to see the offense. I mean, like the old saying is, defense puts trophies in the case while offense puts seats in the butts in the seats.
And that's true. That's true.
What they want. They want more people to come and watch.
And that goes back to the pro sports anyway, and getting to be college now. It goes back to it's all about the money. I mean, it's all about them making more money, and which you can't knock them for it. I mean, it's a business.
Yeah.
I mean, if I was running a business, I'd want to make the most money I could too, but it just, it's kind of bad for the fans, I feel like.
Well, I know one thing that really bothered me when my daughter was at UT, she went there, got a degree from there. She was there for the first 2 years. They didn't charge students to get in. The last 2 years, they decided they could make money if they charged the students to get in as well. Well, it cut down on all the student section, and that, of course, that opened up for other people to buy those spots.
Yeah.
But it just took a lot of the enthusiasm away.
Yeah, it hurts the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And, they're talking about, I don't know if they've done it yet or not, but I know they were planning on adding on that fee to the Tennessee tickets just to pay the NIL for the players. And that's just, I don't know. That's kind of scummy, really, because they're already making hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're wanting us as the fans to pay for it.
Exactly, and then you look at it's trickling down to high school. Yeah, I'm not going to call out the school, but there's a 4A school in Tennessee that has an NIL fund. They get the best players that money can buy, and they've won the state tournament the last few years. And a lot of people know who I'm talking about, but to me, when you're paying high school kids to play, something ain't right.
Oh yeah, in my opinion, right now, if you're a high school out there, if you're going to be behind the times if you don't just go ahead and get your NIL stuff ready, because it's coming.
Yeah, it'll be here before you know it.
I mean, it's already here. Like you said, it's already here, and there's already people. But I feel like a lot of people, and just state by state, the laws are different, and a lot of people don't really understand it right now. But that's the future. The future is NIL, and I think they just come out in Tennessee with that one-time transfer rule where you can go anywhere basically and play immediately one time.
Yeah.
So it's definitely it's here. It's at the beginnings, and if these high schools, the high schools that don't get with it right now are going to get left behind eventually. I don't know how long it's going to take, but eventually they're going to get left behind, just like the small colleges are getting left behind by the big schools because they don't have the money.
And then you also look at the new the thing they're doing with private schools, the vouchers. If you got if I had a kid that was really good, and I was not saying any of this bad, but if I was in one of those inner city schools where the education and stuff wasn't really great, and there's a private school over here, and I can get one of those vouchers, and they say, hey, we want him because he's a great football player, they can cherry pick those kids. And then you've got the private schools, they're getting all the best athletes and the best students, while the private or public schools just getting left out.
The craziest thing, we used to have to play against that. I remember when I was in high school for a year or two there anyway, we had Good Pasture, and they were beating us in baseball and basketball because they were recruiting. They could recruit, and that was the craziest thing, TSSAA, besides the basketball seating. That's one of the craziest things they've ever done is put those schools against us.
Well, when we were in sub-state, Clark Range playing in sub-state one year down in Chattanooga, they were playing Boyd Buchanan, which is a private school in the sub-state. Well, they had a kid there whose dad played in the NFL, was a great basketball player, this kid was. And I asked him, I said, now, where does he live at? Oh, he lives, they named off the place, I forget where it was he lived at. I said, well, how far does he travel every day? 2.5 hours, both ways. I said, wait a minute now. I said, why does he travel that far? Well, that's the first school he could get to. I said, in 2.5 hours, he didn't pass any schools. Oh, well, he didn't pass any schools that he wanted to go to. And I said, okay, that makes no sense whatsoever, but, that's the way it is. They allow it. And
that's crazy. I remember when I was in school, we played Boyd Buchanan in basketball, and I can't remember if we lost to him or if we beat somebody like that to go to the state tournament that year that I was in school. Of course, I didn't play, so I don't remember, but
I know we went one year to Chattanooga Christian, and the brawl broke out in that one. That was one of those that we ended up in. A brawl broke out after the game, and that was one. And that their assistant coach went up in the crowd after one of the Clark Range fans started wailing on him.
Oh,
and it broke out, and it was crazy. Which is, you have that sometimes. I mean, the Pickett-York game, that was a classic around here where York and Pickett County went in the big brawl. And, I mean, it's just, it happens, but first of all, we shouldn't have been playing at their school and them a private school to begin with.
Yeah.
And then to think their coach went up in the crowd and started hitting people. I mean, it was.
I guess you've seen a lot of fights and stuff like that over the years, haven't you?
You see a lot of it down through the years. It's. I don't know. It's and some fan bases are really bad. I mean, you get some fan bases, they get really fired up. I'm gonna call them out by name because they'll all know who I'm talking about. But you get some fan bases that are really, really passionate. They're ready to fight.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Sometimes it's scary. I remember York beat Upperman one year in the finals of the district tournament, and one of the fans from Upperman after the game, before the game, my daughter and I were sitting down there on the floor getting ready to do the game. One of the officials come over and started talking to me. And we were just talking about the weather and all that stuff, just normal, basic talk stuff. Well, after the game, York won, and it was a close game. York won, I think, by 2. And we went outside, and this guy comes up to me, grabs me, and says, I want to know, he said, you broadcast for York. He said, do you know that official that was down there? He said, you were talking to that official for the ball game. And I looked at him just being a smart aleck. I said, yeah, that's my brother. Well, he was furious. I mean, he was ready to go. I never seen anything like it. And my daughter said, he's lying. He's not related to him. Said he just asked us about our drive up here, and we were just talking about where we were from and stuff.
Had him ready to fight.
Yeah,
you,
he was furious. I mean, I said, well, I'm sorry I made you so upset, but
I feel like all fan bases out there, they usually all have one or two people like that are like that, and they're ready to just at the drop of a hat to fight somebody from the other team just because.
And now I'll tell you the one thing I have noticed, though, the one set of officials that have the thinnest skins, because my daughter was a soccer player. I know I said I never done a soccer game, and I don't know anything about soccer. She played for 12 years, and I still don't know nothing about it. But we had the soccer officials, they would come before the game and get in front of the crowd and say, if anybody yells, we're throwing you out.
Oh.
And funny thing was, we were at Friendship Christian, and the girl and one of the girls got tangled up with one of York's players. And one of the dads said, come on, ref. And he had just walked in the thing, so he didn't know. Well, they stopped the game and threw this guy out, physically took him out because he said that to the official.
For saying, come on, ref.
Yeah. And I said, man, it must be nice to be able to just have that much power.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of officials that really, I was at the game the night that the official threw the entire Pickett County fan section out. That was at a tournament. She threw the entire section out.
The entire section.
They made them all get up and leave. Part of them wouldn't leave, but they made the biggest majority of them got up and left.
Wow.
And I said, you're signing on to do that. You've got to know that's coming. I mean,
yeah.
You're going to get that.
You got to have a thick skin if you're doing that. But I mean, some people do take it too far, and they do get too far out of hand. But I don't know. I feel like you should at least give them a warning or something first before you go throwing the whole crowd out like that. And maybe they did. But me and Hunter, we've talked about that before, which Hunter, he can't really talk about that, so I have to be the one to talk about the refs, because where he's a coach, he can't say nothing bad about the refs. But I don't care to say stuff. Which, I mean, they got a hard job, and I umpired Little League there for a little while, and even in Little League, people people get fired. That goes back to the parents we were talking about. They'll talk trash to you at Little League, and it's like, I'm out here making $20. I'm just here because I like to do it.
Well, I know we were doing a game. Philip Hall used to help me do basketball, and I know you know Philip. He was helping me do basketball. And we were at Baxter one night, and Clark Range was playing Upperman, and the official was there, and it was one of the poorest called ball games I've seen in a long time. And Philip just waved his hands like that. Well, the official comes over to me and said, I'll throw you out. I said, what did you say? He said, I will throw you out. Now, I stood up and shoved my chair back, and I said, I'd like to see you throw me out, you son of a. And about that time, Philip grabs me and says, we're still on the air. So I said, folks, this guy said he's going to throw me out. I said, I'd like to see him try. And Lamar looked at him and said, if he goes, we go too.
Oh.
And that was the end of him telling us we were going to leave. That's the only time that they've threatened to throw me out when I didn't even say anything. I just was sitting there calling the ball game, but Philip just made that gesture where he waved his hands after a call. And
that's crazy.
I mean, you get that. You got to be ready for anything.
Oh, yeah. That made me think whenever he said Lamar said that. I remember back in elementary school, we were playing, I'm pretty sure it was North Cumberland we were playing, and we had the ball, and somebody had the ball around half court, and they were right on half court, and they'd picked up their dribble, and they were pivoting with the ball, but when he pivoted, his back foot was going on the line, on the half court line, and their coach was wanting him to call over and back. And it wasn't an over and back, but he was getting fired up at the ref wanting him to call that, even though that's not what the rule is, and he wasn't calling it. And so he was yelling at the ref, and the ref gave him a technical. And they got up and left, the whole team. And it was a close game. I'm pretty sure they were winning. I think it was like 29-27 or something. They were winning. And it was the fourth quarter, I believe, or third quarter anyway. And he got mad at that ref and packed that whole 7th and 8th grade team up, and they left.
Wow. That's the thing about a lot of some of these coaches that get in this sport don't actually know the rules, and that's scary when you get somebody that is just fired up and screaming mad about something, and it's not even the right call.
Yeah,
and you're thinking, okay, what are you complaining about? That's not what the rules say. And I mean, that's something that officials, and I've been on TSSAA officials many times. People knows I get on to them all the time, and my one famous line was, I know the TSSAA referee license is an open book test, but I didn't know it was in Braille. And that made several of them mad. And one of them, I know one of the officials really well, and he come over to me before one game. He said, "Would you please not say that I wish they were at the same game I was at?" He said about me, because he said, "I've heard you say it many times." I said, "Sure." I'm saying
that, and that's the thing too. You're talking about the coaches not knowing the rules. Where they have such a shortage on officials, there's a lot of officials that get in there that don't know the rules either.
Exactly. And it makes, it's one of those situations where they can't get enough people to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. I mean, I know it's, for a lot of these guys, that's all they do. They referee basketball and football, and they do baseball all, so that's their livelihood. Mm-hmm. Now, they take it really serious, but these people that are doing it just, they think, wow, that'd be a good part-time job. I'm just going to do that.
Yeah.
They don't really put that much into it.
Yeah, they don't go in there and actually study the rules and learn the rules, and then they end up getting in a situation that they don't know what they're talking about.
Exactly.
And it makes them look bad, and then of course, if the coach knows what he's talking about, they get into it, and then the coach gets thrown out or whatever, and it just turns into a mess, all because somebody didn't know the rules.
Exactly. When it's just a simple rule that you got to follow. I mean, I don't know. It's just sports today, and I'm going to go on another. I'm going to get on my soapbox. I do not like the instant replay. Every time somebody fouls you and stuff, and you start doing this right here in basketball, irritates me to death. That is the worst thing ever.
I like the instant replay. I like them getting the call right, but I don't like the players wanting to review every single thing now. I don't like that, because that it kills the viewing experience for the fans whenever they're replaying something every 5 minutes, and then they're taking 2 or 3 minutes to replay. And yeah, like you said, when they're twirling their finger, calling for the replay all the time, that gets old.
Yeah, when it's a simple play that, it could go either way, maybe have a replay on it. But when it's one of these flagrant things and you see it, I mean, and then they go back and look at it and say, why in the world did they even challenge that? I mean, you're thinking, okay. But, sometimes I think the instant replay has slowed the game down and made it really long, especially in baseball. It's really done in baseball.
Which they have kind of changed baseball around with the pitch clock and stuff it's sped it up. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, whenever it was first coming out, I was like, I don't really know. I don't know if I'll like this or not, but it's worked. I'll have to give it to him. It really has helped. It helps the viewing experience. Because baseball game can get drug out.
Yeah, when you had 10 or 15 pitching changes or 4 or 5 trips to the mound to talk to the pitcher, and then he takes 20, 30 seconds between each pitch.
Yeah, or the batter takes 2 minutes. They want to listen to their full walk-up song while they're getting into the box.
Yeah, either that or they call timeout after every pitch and step out of the box.
That would happen a lot. So I think those changes have been good. What do you think about the proposal to get the robotic strike zone and the robotic umps?
Well, I don't like taking the human element out of it, because of course I'm old school. I was there when they didn't have instant replay and all that stuff, but I think when you take the stuff like that, it's kind of like tennis. It's really made tennis a little better, maybe calling the lines and stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely helped in tennis. It's funny you said that. I've got sitting around here somewhere. Me and Hunter, we play tennis quite a bit. It's actually sitting over there. But I bought this machine to call our lines because me and him were playing, and I tell him all the time. I said, "You're blind." I said, "You wear glasses."
Yeah.
I said, I swear he'd call him out if they was 6 inches inside. He's gonna call him out on me. Just he like to try to steal a win. He ain't here to defend himself.
Yeah, there you go.
So I can say that. But I bought that. It's called a Baseline Vision, and it mounts on the pole on the one of the net poles, and it's really accurate. It come from some that company's based out of like Egypt or Israel or something, and I was looking because me and him got into playing tennis a lot, and I was looking for something. I said, we ain't gonna be friends if I don't figure out something to call these lines, and because me and him were both real competitive. But we've got that, and it's been great. And I think in something like tennis, I think that's great to have in tennis because you want to get that right. But in baseball with the strike zone, it's not subjective, but it kind of is, because each player's different height and different size, so their strike zone's going to be different. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. And you talk about being old school. And of course, I grew up watching the Atlanta Braves. I mean, you see all this Braves stuff I got around here. I'm a big Braves guy, and I grew up watching Bobby Cox, and he holds the record for getting thrown out of games, and he would. And I always liked that. I like to see the manager come out and argue and fight with them, and that's going to take that away if they do that.
But are they going to? I mean, how are they going to get to where they call whether it's safe at home and all this stuff? Are they going to eventually get robotics into everything? And then, of course, then you lose the human element on it. And there's been mistakes called in games that changed World Series, that changed NBA championships. Mm-hmm. They could have went the other way, but I don't know. I like the human element in it. I just like to have the guy out there, and he can explain why he called something. Whereas if you're a robot's calling it, who you going to argue with?
Yeah. I like to get the right call in the end, but I also like to see them come out there and argue and add a little bit, spice it up a little bit, I guess you could say. But, I mean, you look back on baseball, you're talking about them historically, the worst call in the history, I don't even think anybody would argue this, is Armando Galarrago for the Detroit Tigers when he had that perfect game. Mm-hmm. And that Jim Joyce was the umpire, and the last out of the game, he called that guy safe, and he was out by 4 feet and called him safe and took away the perfect game. But looking back on that now, which they've been 20-something perfect games, that's really the one everybody's going to remember is that one, even though that was not in the record book as a perfect game. Everybody remembers that one because of how it happened.
Yeah, it's if you take the human element out of it, I don't know. It becomes eventually. Then what are you going to do? Get robotic players to play? I mean, I'm sorry. Maybe we get some androids or some AI something to do the game. We won't have to. I just like the human aspect of it myself. That's just part of growing up old school.
I never thought about that, but you mentioned the AI and the robots, and they're becoming so advanced now. Eventually, they're going to be able to, and they're almost able to now, make just a person that's really a robot, but you can't tell the difference. Yeah. And, I mean, what if that happens? That comes and they get a baseball player, and they program him to be Shohei Ohtani. Yeah. And he's really a robot. I mean, in professional sports, you've got all the billionaires are the ones spending the money, so there's probably some crooked one out there who wouldn't care to try to slip that in there.
It was well before my time, but the one baseball owner actually hired a small person to come in and play.
I've read about that.
The strike zone was like here.
Yeah, and he got walked every time. And
so they made a rule that they had to be a certain height before you could even play in the major league. So now you have to be a certain height before you can play.
Yeah, because that guy, he was like 4'2" or something.
And I mean, he got just barely a strike zone. You had to just put him one spot to get him a strike zone. But yeah, I said if you get to robotics, will they be able to adjust to that and all this? It's just. Like I said, I'm just old school. I like the human element. If the human element adds to the game to me.
Yeah, well, it's like we were talking about just in the way the game's played and everything's going to keep changing. and it's going to keep evolving in some way. The sports are. Well, it's just like going back to Jamestown, talking about remember when the Walmart was Tractor Supply is. If you remember that, and of course I was real little, but I remember it being there. If you remember that, it's just crazy to think that a Walmart was that small.
Yeah.
And because now all the Walmarts you see are massive,
Exactly.
and that was just a tiny Walmart. And what's some of the other, you've been around for however many years in Jamestown covering the news and all that. How have you really, what do you think about seeing how it's grown and changed over the years? And even Clark Range too.
Oh, yeah. There's been a lot more businesses in Clark Range that's come in, like, the dollar store and all these convenience store stuff. I remember when there was nothing except Stultz Grocery. If you remember, Freddie Stultz used to have one right at the corner of the four-way out there. He had a little convenience kind of store, and that was the only store around. You had to go down to, you probably don't remember Louis Atkinson's store down on 62 was the store we went to all the time, because I grew up down on in south end of the county on 62 East.
Yeah,
And,
right down that way. I know where you're talking about. The old building's still there, right?
The old building's still there. And then you come toward Jamestown. Burnett's came in, a few years after that, and they put in a grocery store there. But you had to go to Monterey. A lot of people went to Monterey from Clark Range, Crossville, Jamestown to get groceries. And then you look at Jamestown, and Jamestown has changed a lot, folks. If you remember, most people don't remember this, but I remember back when there was no Dairy Queen where it's at today. Dairy Queen used to be on the outskirts of town, and used to be several grocery stores. Of course, now there's no grocery stores hardly in Jamestown, other than Save-A-Lot. There used to be 5 or 6 grocery stores. There was actually a theater in Jamestown at one time years ago, right across from where the post office was at. There was a department store there where right now it's where Hall's Pharmacy's parking lot is. There used to be what was called a Ben Franklin 5 and dime store. There used to be a Radio Shack where Mike Walker has his parking lot now. It's changed immensely. And then when Walmart come in, a lot of the small businesses went out, and that changed everything when they came in. Mm-hmm. But now they're the biggest store in Jamestown, probably one of the biggest employers, since there's no hospital anymore.
Yeah. I'd say they are probably the biggest.
Them and the school system are probably the two biggest.
Yeah. You know what I always tell people now, even just in my time, which I'm 27, but I feel like just taking around the Upper Cumberland here, Cookeville is growing so much right now. Cookeville is going to eventually, it's getting there lately, it's going to be the size that Murfreesboro was. Mm-hmm. And then Crossville is going to get to be as big as Cookeville.
Yeah.
And that leaves, Clark Range and Jamestown and this area around here, in my opinion, I would say in some time in the future here, it's going to get to be as big as Crossville was, whenever I was younger.
That's the thing. If they ever improve the roads, I'm not going to get in the road thing. That's a sore subject with me. But anyway, if they ever did the roads improve, I look for Clark Range to boom a lot of these areas to boom a lot in this community. But, the fact that we're so far off the beaten path is one thing that really hurts Clark Range and Jamestown too, for that matter.
Yeah.
And
especially Jamestown, because really, nowadays, Clark Range being so much closer to the interstate, 20 minutes closer, whenever they get that road in, I predict in the future, and this may be, I don't know, maybe this is a hot take to people, but I predict in the future that Clark Range will outgrow Jamestown by quite a bit.
May very well do it. You mentioned Murfreesboro. When I went to Middle Tennessee State University, of course, now if you go to Murfreesboro, if you go from Lebanon to Murfreesboro, if you know where the VA hospital is, there's businesses from there all the way into Murfreesboro. There was not a business within, I would say, at least close to 10 miles from the VA hospital to Murfreesboro before you got to a business. And now it's moved out and expanded all the way out to that VA hospital. And they've got 2 campuses of Middle Tennessee State now and everything. It just watching them grow is just amazing to see how much it's grown since I was there back in the 80s.
Yeah, Murfreesboro is a big city now.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of family, our family
Yeah.
that live in Murfreesboro. Murfreesboro is a big city now.
Yeah.
And, Cookeville, 10 years ago in Cookeville, whenever I was younger in high school and coming out of high school and stuff, you could drive around Cookeville. The traffic wasn't that bad. Now you go down to Cookeville. Cookeville was not designed, especially when you get off the exit there, whatever it is, by Restaurant Row.
Yeah.
It was not designed to hold the traffic that it's got now. It is screwed up. The traffic patterns are down there.
Absolutely.
And going back to 10 years ago in Cookeville, Target wouldn't have ever even thought about coming to Cookeville then.
No.
And now they're getting a Target and a Home Depot and all that.
Well, I think a lot of what's helped the Middle Tennessee state area, or the Middle Tennessee area as far as that goes, is the fact that Nashville has grown as big as it can get. Mm-hmm. It's landlocked. I mean, there's not much to expand in Nashville unless you come out through Mount Juliet and all those areas.
And that's what's happening. It's pouring out everywhere else.
And it's moving out away from Nashville because Nashville is just so landlocked, and their traffic's never going to get better in Nashville because they can't redo the roads.
Yeah.
And so people don't want to be in Nashville, but they want to be close enough they can go to Nashville.
Yeah.
And that's why
Cookeville's blowed up.
Yeah.
And Cookeville, if Cookeville doesn't do something soon about their traffic problem, they're never going to be able to fix it, and it's going to be an issue forever.
Absolutely. It's going to be one of those.
But instead, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say, but instead, Cookeville wants to go spend $750,000 putting those signs up or whatever there.
And I'll tell you a town that is surprisingly growing a lot, which is surprising me, is Monterey. Monterey has picked up a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Lately. And Monterey is growing, and it's in one of those between Crossville and Cookeville. It's becoming one of those destination places. Like they've got the Mexican restaurant now, and then they've got the new Italian restaurant that is really good. I'm going to throw them a shameless plug in there. But folks are coming to Monterey just to come to Monterey.
Yeah.
And that's helped the city of Monterey. I know we go down every year. I like to go down for the Standing Stone celebration when the indigenous people came back to the Standing Stone Monument. And those folks can tell you that Monterey has changed so much. They said they cannot believe how much Monterey has changed.
Oh, yeah.
And they come from all over the country.
Yeah. Monterey, it's for the people that Cookeville's kind of got it's not a huge city yet, but it's getting that bigger city feel to it. So Monterey, I feel like, gives the people who want to live close to Cookeville, still gives them a small town feel.
Yeah, and in Cookeville being a college town, college towns help a lot. You're going to see a boom in Jamestown once they get the Roane State campus built and the TCAT campus built. Once they do that, you may see a lot of boom in Jamestown, a lot more than what has been lately, because I look for a lot more people to move there and try, their business come in, cater to that college.
Yeah, a lot more people who are still working and still younger, because I feel like a lot of people who move in here now are retired people. And yeah, that, like you said, that'll bring in a lot of people who will want to cater their business to those people.
And I don't mean this to sound as a bad term, but I like to call a lot of the new people that moved in the game halfbackers. Yeah. They went to Florida and didn't like it there, so they came halfway back and stopped in Tennessee.
Oh, yeah, I've sold a lot of houses to people that done that exact same thing.
Exactly. Florida's if you're from up north, Florida is a real environment change for people that come out of Michigan, Ohio, and those places.
Yeah, I think they don't expect that, and they get down there and it shocks them how different it is. But then they can come to Tennessee and they can still get all the seasons, and they can still have great weather, but they still get the snow that they're used to having up there, but dialed down a lot.
Exactly, and especially not the 110, 120 degree temperatures you get in Florida.
Yeah.
South Carolina's the same way. I have a sister that lives in South Carolina. During the summer, their temperatures are always in triple digits all summer long.
Yeah.
I mean, and people that are from up north that are used to maybe having at the highest temperature 80 degrees, they get there. It's a definite culture shock.
Yeah, I sold a house to a couple. They were originally from up north, and then they moved here, and they lived here for a little bit. And then they thought they would go down to Florida. They said they wanted to try down there where the weather was always good and stuff. and they stayed just a few years down there, and then they come back and bought a house off of me because they didn't like it down there. They said wherever they lived at down there was doing, like we're talking about, all these places growing. They said when they got down there, they had a nice little farm on a few acres and had their horses outside of the city, and it's spilled out onto them, and they've took over, and everything around them has been subdivided and packed together, and they got tired of it and they wanted to come back here.
I know my sister lives in Charleston. She runs a landscaping business in Charleston, and where her location is in what they call Goose Creek, South Carolina, and it has expanded now. It went from when we were used to go down there. I haven't been down there in several years, but it's went from a 2-lane to a 6-lane through that town now. That's how much it's grown and how big, and the traffic situation is. So it's happening everywhere. Folks are just moving in everywhere, and a lot of folks are leaving the north, though. A lot of people don't want to finish their lives out in the freezing cold, I guess.
Yeah, and now you just look back historically, the north used to be where all the industry was and all the businesses was and all that, but now you can have a business anywhere with the technology now. And then going back to Cookeville and here and just all this area right here, we're just so geographically, we're such a great place to be for businesses, because you can be, I've read the stat one time, it's like where we're at, you can be within 75% of the whole country's population in 8 hours.
Yeah.
And businesses love that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why I think we've grown so much, and I think we'll continue to grow so much.
I think so too. And like we said, folks, I had an aunt and uncle. They were just the exact opposite. They lived in Iowa. And if you've ever been to Iowa, it snows all the time during the winter. Iowa's terrible during the winter. They decided they wanted to move to Alaska. Well, after about a year in Alaska, they realized that was the most brutal conditions in the world. They moved back to Iowa because it was so much nicer in Iowa than it was in Alaska. So you get the folks that a lot of folks think, well, hey, it's going to be much better there, but it's not always compatible. You're not compatible.
The grass isn't always greener on the other side, is it?
Exactly right. If you're used to 80-degree temperatures, when you get up to those triple digits, it gets really warm.
It's a whole different world then, ain't it?
Exactly. And where they went from Iowa in Alaska, where the part of Alaska where they moved to, you couldn't shut your car off when you went into a store. You had to leave your car running. If you didn't, it wouldn't start. It would be so bad. And they would have to leave their cars run, lock their cars up and leave them running while they went into a grocery store or anything, because and if you didn't have a garage, you couldn't get your car to start during the winter. You had to have a heated garage or you couldn't get your car to start.
See, that's just not how I would like to live. I would rather, me personally, I would rather be in the hot than the cold.
Absolutely.
And I sold you were talking about having to have a garage. I sold a place to a woman from Arizona, and she was talking about in the summer out there, she said, if you didn't have your garage, and she said most of them had to be air conditioned.
Yeah.
She said you would just burn up out there in your car. And of course, I went to Arizona. Me and my wife went just a couple months back, and I love it out there. I mean, I would move out there tomorrow.
Yeah.
But I wasn't out there in the summertime, though. That's what my wife says. She said, we ain't been out there in the summer. She said, you wouldn't want to stay in the summer.
That's like Gary Hall was telling me. He was talking about, he travels all over the place. He went to Michigan. He said they had found some great property right on Lake Michigan that was really, really cheap. And he said, I couldn't believe it was this price. He said, and then I got to talking to some of the folks that live there around it. He said, and they told me, he said, that's because it's only, you can only stand it about a month out of the year. The rest of the time, it's so miserably cold, you can't stand it. That's why they were selling it so cheap. Nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
But they were trying to get people from off places to come in and buy it, not knowing that it was.
Yeah,
It's like it is. Yeah.
Somebody will probably end up buying it without even looking at it.
Exactly.
Like somebody buy some land over in Wilder, think, it's over. It says it's this close to Cookeville and this close to Knoxville and Nashville.
Yeah.
Then they go to around all them curvy roads and they throw up about 3 times and then they sell it.
With their helicopter, it's about that far. That's what I always said. If you've got a helicopter or a jet, you can get to Knoxville in 30 minutes from a Wilder. That's for sure.
I love you talking about Gary Hall. I love seeing his Facebook. He posts all the time. He's always somewhere.
Yeah, he's on the road more than anybody I've ever seen. he travels a lot, and I'm just glad he comes to helps me do football and stuff, because like I said, football is one of those things you can't hardly do by yourself.
Yeah.
Baseball, he comes helps me a lot with baseball, and when I need him, he fills in basketball. So I've had some good folks to work with, though. I've had a lot of good color announcers over the years. I've had Mike Wakefield, he was really a good one, and Philip Hall helped me for a while in basketball. I mean, I've had a lot of good help throughout the years.
That is a good point, I feel like, to segue into what advice would you give somebody who's wanting to get into radio and broadcasting, sports announcing?
Well, the main thing is you gotta really love it, because it's, it has its ups and downs. It's one of those things you really have to work at. It's not one of the more lucrative positions. And a lot of folks think you see these major colleges or college announcers or pro announcers, they make great money, but the major part of it is getting into the game and really loving the game and wanting to be part of it. That's the thing. I could have left a few times, but I stayed here because I love doing the high school sports here and doing that. But it's one of those things that really you've just got to really want it, and you can't just be one thing. If you're doing local radio like this, you got to do everything.
Especially like you said, in a small town.
Yeah, small town. You got to do. I do sales. I do a little bit of everything. So it's just not one of those things that you can just go in and do one thing. And you got to be ready to start, and you take your lumps right off the bat, folks. And you got to. The one thing I tell anybody that asks me about it, you got to realize not everybody's going to love you. You got to be ready, because you'll have those that really don't like you. I had a guy tell me the other day, he was one of the businessmen out of town. He said, we had a truck driver come in here from Cannon County. Said he loved York football, said, but he hated that guy that announces it. He said he hates him with a passion. I said, that's okay. I said, some people like you and some people don't. I mean,
I feel like that's in anything. You're never going to make everybody happy.
Exactly. It's just more vocal. People are a lot more vocal. And it's just one of those things you just got to be, if you want to get into this business, you really got to be ready to be, do whatever needs to be done. And you got to really love the game. If you don't love the game, don't get in it, because it'll get real old real quick.
You can tell that, I feel like, in announcers who aren't as passionate about the game. You can tell it in their announcing, and that really brings the whole vibe down for everybody listening.
Yeah, I've seen folks that once they get burnt out, you can tell when people are burnt out doing it. They just kind of go through the motions. And I try not to become one of those that sound like I'm going through the motions. I try to keep it pumped up. But there's a lot of folks that get in this business, and then after a few years, I had a guy from Macon County. He was telling me, he said, we were at state tournament. He said, man, he said, I've been doing this for 15 years. He said, I just can't do it no more. He said, I'm done. I said, you've been doing it 15 years? He said, how long have you been? I said, well, this makes 33. He said, oh my gosh. He said, how in the world did you stay in it all these years? I said, it just becomes the thing to do. It's to me, it's like breathing. It's just like something I can do.
It's part of who you are.
Yeah. And it becomes one of those things it becomes habit.
Yeah, you really probably wouldn't know what to do if you wasn't doing it.
I don't know what I'd do for a living if I wasn't doing it. I guess I would be picking up cans on the side of the road.
Well, we've been going for over 2 hours now.
Oh, gosh. This is probably the world's longest podcast ever.
Yeah, I've had some long ones, which I like long ones. I'm a talker, though. I mean, I could sit here and talk all night long. We've had a few over 2 hours. We had one I done with a couple of my buddies. It was a little bit different style, but we went 4 hours and 15 minutes on it. So I like to talk. You got anything else you want to say?
I'm not really. I mean, folks, I appreciate you, everybody's support over the years. I've been doing this a lot of years, had a lot of support. And I said the one compliment I ever got, I got a lot of people saying, hey, I love to hear you do the ball games. This one lady, the cleaning lady at York Institute, looked at me and she said, you know what? She said, you've been doing this a long time. I said, yeah. And she was cleaning up the gym. She said, you know what? She said, I think they designed this job for you. And that's the best compliment I've ever gotten.
You're just born to do it.
I guess when she said this job was designed for me, I said, well, I appreciate that. I said, that's the best compliment I've ever had.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I tell everybody that we've got the best sports announcer around, and
I appreciate it.
I mean, even if it isn't a Clark Range game or something, we'll turn it on, and you're just great to listen to. And like I said before, you can just really paint the picture that you just feel like you're there. Even if you ain't watching the game, if you're just driving your car, I can just picture it in my mind like I'm sitting right there from your point of view watching the game. And I think being a sports announcer, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's getting people in touch with what's going on and trying to make sure they know what is going on during the game. I've seen announcers that will say, they'll be talking and they'll just start talking to somebody on the side, over on the side, forget what they're doing. And I said, it's first and all, it's a job. People say, wow, you got the best job in the world. You're not there when I have to be there an hour before setting up equipment, an hour after tearing it down, and one team gets beat by 70 points, and you're having to sit there and try to pretend it's still a lot of fun, because I've had those too. I've had games where teams get beat by 70, and you're standing there trying to make it sound exciting.
Yeah, it's hard to keep people into that.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that you just have to do. If you got to really love, like I said, you got to love the sports.
Yeah, well, you're definitely a local legend, as I said earlier, and
I don't know about legend.
And we appreciate you coming on.
Hey, I appreciate you having me.
This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about everything.
I think we've covered everything that I can think of off the top of my head. We might have you back on down the road, and we'll think of some more stuff to talk on.
Just any time, just holler at me.
Well, there you have it, everybody. That's a local legend, Garry Clark. And like I always say, subscribe to the podcast. And we thank you for listening. Have a good night.